Case File 005, Gilgamesh and the Bloodline of Giants. April 2003. The world's eyes were fixed on the vast, unforgiving plains of Iraq. News anchors spoke of war, of democracy, of weapons of mass destruction. But what if those headlines were nothing more than a carefully constructed veil? What if the true target, the real prize, lay buried beneath ancient sands? A prize that wasn't oil, nor political dominion, but the very remains of a king who walked the earth over 4 millennia ago. A king whose existence was not just a myth, but a chilling premonition. The tomb of Gilgamesh is not a simple grave, but a resurrection chamber. Just weeks before Baghdad fell, a German archaeologist made a staggering announcement, a discovery that should have carved its way into every history book on Earth. Deep within Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization itself, he claimed to have found it, the final resting place of Gilgamesh. Yes, that Gilgamesh, the legendary ruler of Uruk, the 2/3 god, 1/3 man. The colossal figure, said to tower 17 feet tall. The very king who journeyed to the ends of the earth for immortality. Some say he was Nimrod, the mighty hunter of the Bible, perhaps even a descendant of the ancient Nephilim. But instead of global celebration, instead of a rush to witness history unearthed, something far more unsettling occurred. Within a month, American tanks rolled into Iraq. The dig site, once bustling with academic excitement, was abruptly shut down. The archaeologists disappeared. The media went silent. And then, US troops established a base directly over the supposed resting place of humanity's oldest king. Locals still whisper of strange night operations. Heavy trucks rumbling away. Guarded convoys vanishing into the desert. Whatever was hidden within that chamber, it was taken. Then, a profound silence descended. Why would the most powerful military force on the planet cordon off an ancient grave? Why deny all journalistic access? Why treat a body thousands of years old as a matter of urgent national security? This isn't set to conspiracy theory. This is a question the silence screams. The very foundation of history begins to crack. The desert's forbidden secret. Let us rewind. Long before the Romans marched, before the glory of Greece, even before the pharaohs raised their colossal pyramids along the Nile, there was Sumer, a land cradled between the mighty Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Scholars call it the true beginning of civilization. Here, writing was born. Cities first rose, laws were first etched, but concealed within its ancient clay tablets lies something far darker. The story of a king so utterly extraordinary, so profoundly inhuman, that historians still debate his true nature. Was he merely a man? Was he a myth? Or was he something not entirely of this earth? His name was Gilgamesh. The Epic of Gilgamesh stands as the world's oldest surviving narrative, carved into clay around 2000 BC. Yet its tale reads less like an ancient poem and more like a carefully veiled historical document. These lines of cuneiform describe Gilgamesh not as a mortal ruler but as a hybrid. 2/3 divine, 1/3 human, a being of impossible strength, of unimaginable size. He dwarfed his subjects. He stood nearly 17 feet tall. His kingdom Uruk was Sumerset's first great city, a metropolis of towering temples, formidable walls, and grand palaces. It rose from the desert, as if crafted by the gods themselves. Archaeologists today can still walk among its majestic ruins. But the man who reigned there was no ordinary man. The tablets tell of a tyrant. Gilgamesh was not beloved. He was feared. They say he abused his power, taking what he desired, oppressing the weak, ruling with an iron fist of cruelty. His arrogance reached even the heavens. The gods themselves looked down upon Uruk and decided to intervene. To counter Gilgamesh's unchecked might, they fashioned his equal, a wild man named Enkidu. Enkidu was everything Gilgamesh was not. He was born of clay, molded by the gods themselves. His purpose was to humble the king. Hairy, animalistic, clothed in skins, he roamed the wilderness, were running with beasts, untouched by human society. Yet, he possessed immense strength, uncanny speed, fearless resolve. He was a mirror to Gilgamesh himself. When these two finally met, it was not with friendship, it was with earth-shattering violence. They clashed in the very streets of Uruk, shaking the city's ancient foundations. But in a twist that echoes through all ancient storytelling, their battle forged a profound brotherhood. Enemies became companions. Together they became unstoppable. The epic recounts their legendary adventures, slaying monstrous guardians, defying the decrees of the gods, even confronting the terrifying creature Humbaba in the cedar forest. But beneath this surface narrative, the story hints at something more. Many researchers see in these ancient lines clear echoes of the Bible's Nephilim, giant offspring of fallen angels and human women, beings described as men of renown, mighty and terrifying. Gilgamesh, 2/3 god and 1/3 man, fits this description with disturbing precision. Even his connection to Uruk stirs biblical parallels. Uruk is listed in Genesis as one of the cities founded by Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. Some audacious theories even suggest that Gilgamesh and Nimrod are one and the same. But even giants, even demigods, must face mortality. And for Gilgamesh, tragedy struck when Enkidu, the brother he never expected, was struck down by the gods. His death shattered the king's heart. Gilgamesh, who once believed himself invincible, suddenly tasted the bitter essence of human limits. In his grief, he embarked on the most desperate quest of all, the search for eternal life. His journey took him across vast deserts and treacherous seas, into the mythical land of the gods, even down into the dreaded underworld. Yet, in the end, he failed. Gilgamesh returned to Uruk, not as an immortal, but as a broken king, haunted by death, his empire a shadow of its former glory. And yet, his story does not truly end there. Because the most chilling part of the epic is not his reign, nor his desperate quest. It is the description of his burial. The tablets do not hint that Gilgamesh was laid to rest in an ordinary grave. His body was sealed in a tomb, described as a resurrection chamber, a chamber beneath the great Euphrates River itself. It was said to be constructed with a single terrifying purpose, that one day the mighty king might rise again. A myth? Perhaps. But if you find yourself captivated by these ancient threads, by the potential for secrets buried deep in our past, consider this: the journey into forgotten history has only just begun. Hit that subscribe button. Join our expedition into the unknown, because the deeper we dig, the more startling the truths we uncover. The King of Uruk, myth or monster? Now, fast forward to the modern era, and suddenly, archaeologists claim to have found this very tomb. Suddenly, the epic isn't just poetry, it's prophecy. If Gilgamesh truly lived, truly ruled, and was truly buried in a chamber designed to bring him back, then what lies beneath the Euphrates may not be dead at all. That possibility, that the first king of civilization was no mere man, but a Nephilim giant embedded with the technology of resurrection, sets the stage for one of the most disturbing mysteries of our time. For centuries, the Epic of Gilgamesh was dismissed, a beautiful, poetic legend carved into dusty clay tablets, residing in the quiet archives of museums. But then, an event occurred, one that threatened to erase the very line between myth and history. It was 2003. In the war-torn land once known as Mesopotamia, a discovery was made. The man behind it was a German archaeologist named Uruk Fassbinder. Working with his team near the ruins of Uruk, modern-day Warka in southern Iraq, he utilized advanced ground-penetrating radar, scanning deep beneath the ancient sands. What he found sent shockwaves through his team. The radar images revealed a vast, man-made structure, buried directly beneath the dried channels of the Euphrates River. A structure that matched, with astonishing precision, the burial site described in the Epic of Gilgamesh. In an interview with the BBC in April 2003, Fassbinder declared it. His voice carried the weight of millennia. "We have found the tomb of Gilgamesh." According to him, the underground chambers, the walls, the corridors, all aligned with the ancient Sumerian texts. For the first time, it seemed Gilgamesh was not just a story. He was a real king, perfectly preserved, waiting in the ground for millennia. The details were chilling. The site was not described as a mere grave, but as something the Sumerians called a resurrection tomb. This was not simply a place to honor the dead. This was a chamber built with a profound intention that its occupant might one day return. And if the legends held true, the body of Gilgamesh, 2/3 god, 1/3 man, 17 feet tall, lay sealed inside, waiting. But history would take an immediate darker turn. Just weeks after Fassbinder's announcement, the world's attention was forcibly shifted. On March 20th, 2003, the United States and its allies launched a full-scale invasion of Iraq. Officially, the reason was crystal clear. Saddam Hussein alleged weapons of mass destruction, but on the ground, something far stranger was happening. Reports surfaced. The excavation of the tomb stopped abruptly. Archaeologists were ordered to leave. The site was sealed. Then, according to locals in the region, the US military rolled in, surrounding the area with checkpoints, razor wire. What had been an open dig became an impenetrable military zone. Journalists who had come to document this monumental excavation were barred. Even the BBC, which first reported on the tomb's discovery, went ominously silent. The story vanished overnight. Yet, the locals kept talking. Farmers and villagers living near the ruins described eerie activity. They claimed that under the cloak of night, convoys of military trucks moved in and out of the site. They spoke of strange digging noises, heavy machinery operating after dark, large crates being hauled away under tight security. Whatever was in that tomb, it was not being left behind. Then came the most damning detail: the timing. Fassbinder's team announced the discovery of Gilgamesh's tomb in April 2003. By May, US forces controlled the region. In less than 1 month, an archaeological project that could have been the greatest discovery in human history was buried, literally and figuratively, under the swirling fog of war. The official explanation? None. The site was simply declared off-limits for security reasons. Fassbinder himself later admitted further excavation was impossible. His words were chilling. Some things will have to remain buried. But what could be so dangerous about a 4,000-year-old king's tomb? Why did the US military treat it as a matter of national security? Theories began to spiral. Some suggested the body of Gilgamesh had been recovered, perfectly preserved, in a state of unnatural stasis. Others believed the tomb contained advanced Sumerian technology, knowledge lost to history, technology capable of altering the balance of power on Earth. Still others whispered of genetic material, the very DNA of a Nephilim giant, DNA that could be harvested, studied, perhaps even cloned. The unseen war tomb raiders, or truth seekers. Then there sits the question of prophecy. In the epic itself, Gilgamesh's burial site is inextricably linked to resurrection. What if the ancients weren't speaking metaphorically? What if the so-called resurrection chamber was exactly that? A device, a mechanism, or a ritual space designed to bring its occupant back? If this is true, then the US didn't just seize a body, they seized a blueprint for immortality. The invasion of Iraq was sold to the public as a war for democracy, for freedom, for protection against weapons of mass destruction. But ask yourself, what weapon could be more destructive than reviving the bloodline of the Nephilim? What weapon could be more valuable than the secret to life after death? Here lies the deepest, most unnerving mystery. Since 2003, there has not been a single credible update on the tomb of Gilgamesh. Not one excavation report, not one photograph, not one academic paper. The entire story was erased, as if it never happened. Even attempts to file government information requests about the site have been met with denial. It is as though the tomb simply vanished, buried again, not by the passage of time, but by design. But the locals remember. The convoys, the soldiers, the forbidden dig. and in their whispers echoes the most unsettling question of all. Did the US uncover the tomb of Gilgamesh? And if so, what did they take out of it? While the tomb of Gilgamesh was sealed off by soldiers, another drama was unfolding just a few hundred miles away, in the heart of the Iraqi capital, Baghdad. There stood one of the greatest repositories of ancient knowledge on Earth, the Iraq Museum. Within its vaults lay hundreds of thousands of priceless artifacts, tablets, manuscripts, relics from Mesopotamia, the very birthplace of civilization. Many of these pieces were directly linked to Sumer, to Uruk, to the era of Gilgamesh himself. If the king's tomb held his body, then this museum held his story. And yet, in one of the strangest coincidences of the entire war, the museum was left completely unguarded during the chaos of the US invasion. No soldiers at its gates, no police to protect it, nothing. On April 10th, 2003, just days after the fall of Baghdad, looters stormed the museum. The building was ransacked, display cases shattered, priceless relics of humanity's first civilization vanished into the shadows. To the world, it looked like a tragedy of war, mindless chaos destroying our shared heritage. But eyewitnesses tell a far more disturbing story. Several museum employees claimed that before the looters even arrived, US troops were already inside. They weren't smashing displays or grabbing gold statues. Instead, they moved directly to the lower levels of the building, into the heavily restricted storage rooms, where the museum's most secret collections were kept. Down there were thousands of boxes filled with Sumerian tablets, sealed vaults that had never even been cataloged publicly. According to the staff, soldiers hauled crates out of the basement, loaded them onto military trucks, and disappeared into the night. Only after that did the desperate looters rush in. What makes this even stranger is what the looters left behind: gold coins, silver jewelry, ornate treasures worth millions, the kinds of objects thieves risked their lives for. Yet these remained untouched, inscribed in cuneiform, the language of the Sumerians. Thousands of them. Knowledge, not mere treasure, was the ultimate target. The silent vaults of Baghdad. When international investigators were later brought in, they were stunned. One report noted that the looters seemed to have professional knowledge of where to go. They didn't waste time smashing through locked doors at random. They headed straight to the most secure storerooms, past labyrinthine corridors that only staff would know how to navigate. How could untrained looters have managed that? Unless, of course, someone else had already cleared the path. The US government officially denied stealing artifacts, but the evidence told another story. Empty vaults, missing manuscripts, no inventory to prove what had been taken. And then, silence. What could have been inside those vaults that was so valuable it warranted military seizure? According to some researchers, many of the tablets in the museum described rituals, star maps, and the actions of the Anunnaki, the gods of Sumer, often associated with the fallen angels of biblical lore. Some tablets even hinted at the burial and possible resurrection of kings, rulers who were not like other men. If Gilgamesh truly existed, then his epic was not just a poem. It was a fragment of a larger body of Sumerian knowledge. Knowledge that may have been locked in those very vaults. Even more unsettling are the parallels. In April 2003, archaeologists claimed to have discovered the tomb of Gilgamesh. In that same month, US forces surrounded the site. And in that same month, the Baghdad Museum, the single greatest archive of Sumerian civilization, was stripped of its secrets. The pattern is impossible to ignore. The body of the king, and the texts that describe his power, both taken within weeks of each other. Officially, this is all dismissed as mere coincidence. The war was chaotic. Looting was rampant. The military had bigger priorities than clay tablets. But the locals who watch soldiers carry boxes into the night still whisper otherwise. The fact that gold and silver were left untouched while fragile manuscripts vanished suggests a far more deliberate operation. If true, it means that in 2003, the United States may have seized not just the tomb of Gilgamesh, but also the instructions to unlock it. And what does one do with the body of a Nephilim king and the ancient blueprints for resurrection? The Epic of Gilgamesh doesn't describe an ordinary burial. It speaks of a king laid to rest in a place unlike any other, a resurrection tomb. To the ancients, this was no simple grave. It was a chamber crafted to preserve, perhaps even revive, the mighty king of Uruk. For centuries, this was dismissed as myth, symbolic poetry from a forgotten age. But the events of 2003 forced the world to reconsider. When Uruk Fassbinder claimed to have located the tomb beneath the Euphrates, his words carried a strange weight. Not a tomb, not a grave. He specifically called it a resurrection chamber. And in the chaos that followed the US invasion, the sealed-off dig site, the nighttime convoys, the question hung in the air like smoke. What if the ancients weren't speaking in metaphors? What if they meant exactly what they wrote? The whispers grew darker when researchers and conspiracy hunters began digging through government records. In 2018, under the Freedom of Information Act of FOIA, a request was filed by a citizen, demanding access to documents pertaining to the resurrection chamber of Gilgamesh, the location of his body, and the location of buried Nephilim. The request was swiftly and firmly denied. Pause for a moment. FOIA requests are filed every day, about every imaginable subject. Most of them come back with bland responses, stacks of redacted papers, or simple no records found. But in this case, the very phrasing of the denial carried a profound weight. If the idea was nonsense, a harmless myth, why deny it? Why not simply say, no such documents exist? Instead, the government treated the request as sensitive, locked it behind classified walls, which suggests something far more sinister, that such documents do exist, and that they cannot be revealed. What could possibly be so dangerous about a 4000-year-old body? Theories abound. Some believe the tomb contained technology, mechanisms lost to time, engineered by the Sumerians, with knowledge imparted by the Anunnaki themselves. Others suggest the body itself was the treasure, the DNA of a giant, a hybrid of divine and human blood. Imagine what modern science, armed with gene editing and cloning technology, could do with such a sample. Immortality. Super soldiers. The terrifying rebirth of the Nephilim. There is a reason the Bible warns of the days of Noah, a time when giants roamed the earth, when human corruption was tied to the bloodlines of the fallen. If Gilgamesh was one of them, then preserving his body wasn't just about honoring a king. It was about creating a doorway, a pathway to bring the Nephilim back. And if the US military truly took possession of that body in 2003, then perhaps that doorway has already been cracked open. Even more disturbing are the patents that surfaced in later years. Blueprints filed for devices labeled as resurrection chambers. Though inactive, the very fact that someone attempted to patent such technology raises uncomfortable questions. Who inspired these designs? Were they based on ancient texts? The very tablets stolen from Baghdad's museum? Or were they reverse-engineered from what was found in Gilgamesh's tomb? The silence surrounding the discovery is deafening. No more archaeological reports. No photographs. No follow-up articles in mainstream media. The entire story was erased, as if it never happened. But silence can be its own kind of confession. Sometimes what isn't said screams louder than words. The Genesis Protocol. So we are left with this haunting possibility. In 2003, the tomb of Gilgamesh was unearthed, only to be seized, sealed, and swallowed by military secrecy. The resurrection chamber, whether symbolic or literal, vanished from public record. But fragments of truth slipped through. A denied FOIA request, a silenced archaeologist, a rumor of convoys in the night. If the ancients built a chamber to awaken a king, then perhaps somewhere behind locked doors and classified files, the process of resurrection has already begun. To understand why the discovery of Gilgamesh's tomb was so alarming, we must step back, not just thousands of years to Sumer, but even further, to the earliest chapters of the Bible. In Genesis 6, there is a passage. often skipped over in Sunday school, but whispered about by theologians, by historians, by conspiracy researchers alike. It speaks of a time before the Great Flood. The sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took them as wives. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of men and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown. Who were these Nephilim? According to many interpretations, they were the offspring of fallen angels, beings who abandoned heaven to corrupt humanity, mingling with mortal women. The result was a hybrid race. Giants, powerful, violent, and unnatural. Their presence on earth was so destructive, some say, that God unleashed the Great Flood to wipe them out, but fragments of their bloodline may have survived. And in the sun-baked deserts of Mesopotamia, one of those bloodlines may have taken the very throne of Uruk. Gilgamesh, described as 2/3 God and 1/3 man, fits this profile disturbingly well. Not entirely human. Larger, stronger, more ruthless than any man. His arrogance, his insatiable hunger for power, his desperate quest for immortality, all mirror the very traits the Bible attributes to the Nephilim. Here's steps where things become chilling. Many believe Gilgamesh is the same figure the Bible calls Nimrod. Genesis 10 calls Nimrod a mighty hunter before the Lord. He founded cities, including Uruk. He led rebellions, built empires, and defied God himself by constructing the infamous Tower of Babel. Nimrod was more than a man. He was the archetype of tyranny, rebellion, and fallen bloodlines. If Gilgamesh and Nimrod are the same person, then we are no longer talking about simple mythology. We are talking about a real king whose blood carried the corruption of the Watchers, the fallen angels themselves. That would make his tomb not just a burial site, but a vault containing the genetic legacy of the Nephilim. Think about what that means in a modern context. Our age is defined by science. The ancients could never have imagined DNA sequencing, cloning, CRISPR gene editing. If governments or secret agencies gained access to the genetic material of a Nephilim, what would stop them from trying to bring that bloodline back? To engineer hybrids, to create soldiers not bound by human limits. The book of Matthew contains a prophecy about the end of days. Jesus himself warns, as it was in the days of Noah, so it shall be at the coming of the Son of Man. What were the days of Noah? A time when the Nephilim walked the earth. Giants, monsters, hybrids of heaven and humanity. If the prophecy is true, then perhaps the re-emergence of the Nephilim is not just a possibility. It is inevitable. Now, connect the dots. In 2003, Gilgamesh's tomb is discovered and immediately seized. The Baghdad Museum, overflowing with Sumerian tablets describing gods, giants, and ancient technology, is emptied under mysterious circumstances. FOIA requests about resurrection chambers and buried Nephilim are denied. Put together, it paints a picture difficult to ignore. Could it be that the powers of our age are not just studying history, but preparing to repeat it? Could the wars we fight, the regimes we topple, the deserts we occupy, be about more than politics and oil? Could they be about retrieving the blood of the Nephilim, securing it, and using it to shape the future of humanity? If these questions stir a deep curiosity within you, a craving for knowledge often suppressed, then our collection of esoteric knowledge and demonology documentaries will pull you deeper into these compelling depths. The link for that playlist is in the pinned comment below. If so, then Gilgamesh is not just a relic of the past. He is the key to the future. His tomb is not a grave. It's a doorway back to the age of giants. And if the ancients built a resurrection chamber to ensure his return, perhaps the war in Iraq was never about what we were told. Perhaps it was about making sure that return happened under the control of those who hold the power today. The chilling possibility is this: Gilgamesh, Nimrod, the Nephilim. They were not destroyed. They were buried. And now, in secret laboratories and classified programs, their blood may be stirring again. The Stargate Echoes. The story of Gilgamesh's tomb is disturbing enough on its own. But when you start connecting it with another thread of Iraq's history, the picture becomes almost unbelievable. It isn't just about the body of a giant king. It may also be about a machine, a portal, one that could reach into realms beyond our own. The Whispers call it the Stargate. Rumors of an ancient Stargate in Mesopotamia stretch back more than a century. As early as the 1920s, explorers and researchers spoke of strange inscriptions, temple carvings, references in Sumerian texts that suggested a gateway to the gods. Some interpreted this as poetic metaphor. Others believed it was literal, a device hidden in that ancient land that allowed beings to travel between worlds. By the 1940s, the rumors had grown so loud that world powers began circling. In 1941, Iraq was dragged into conflict, not just between Britain and local forces, but between the British and Nazi Germany. And here's where it becomes sinister. Adolf Hitler was obsessed with occult knowledge, ancient relics, technologies that might give him unimaginable power. He sent his SS units scouring the globe for artifacts tied to lost civilizations. Some believe the Nazis entered Iraq specifically hunting for the Stargate, convinced that whoever controlled it would control access to another realm entirely. The Second World War ended. Hitler's empire collapsed. But the whispers didn't die. Instead, they grew louder in the 1980s, when Saddam Hussein himself made a shocking claim. According to reports, Saddam declared he had uncovered ancient Sumerian technology in Iraq, including what he called a Stargate. He allegedly tasked his scientists with studying it, deciphering it, learning how to activate it. He even explicitly linked his regime to the glories of ancient Babylon, commissioning restorations of temples, erecting inscriptions that connected his rule to the kings of old. To him, Iraq was not just a modern state. It was the land of Gilgamesh and Nimrod. And if the rumors are true, Saddam believed he held their power in his hands. Fast forward to the early 1990s. The Gulf War, Operation Desert Storm. It pitted Saddam against the US coalition. Officially, the conflict was about Kuwait and oil. But some researchers argue America's interest went far deeper. If Saddam truly possessed an artifact or technology like a Stargate, then containing it, or seizing it, would have been a matter of utmost global importance. After all, what weapon of mass destruction could compare to the ability to open a doorway between dimensions? Then came 2003, the invasion of Iraq. The search for weapons of mass destructions dominated headlines. But again, none were ever found. What if the phrase weapons of mass destructions was a code? A cover for something the public could never be told? What if the real weapon wasn't a missile or a bomb, but a portal buried in the sands? Here's where the timelines truly collide. In April 2003, Fassbinder's team announced the discovery of Gilgamesh's tomb in Uruk. In the same month, Baghdad's museum, home to Sumerian tablets that may have described the Stargate's use, was emptied. And in that same war, the US military swept across Iraq with unprecedented speed, securing archaeological sites with as much urgency as oil fields. Was the hunt for the Stargate running alongside the seizure of Gilgamesh's body? Consider the implications. The Sumerians claimed their kings received knowledge directly from the Anunnaki, the gods who descended from the heavens. What if the Stargate was the very bridge by which these beings came and went? If Saddam Hussein had control of such a device, or even fragments of it, it would explain why his regime was treated as an existential global threat, why the world's most powerful military risked everything to bring him down. Even stranger, some former US military personnel have hinted that ancient technology was one of the true hidden objectives of the war. Unofficial reports surfaced of massive, heavily guarded convoys transporting items from ancient sites directly to the United States. No photos, no confirmation, but consistent whispers that gnaw at the edges of the official narrative. Skeptics laugh. They say it's fantasy, the stuff of movies. And yet, isn't it strange that the very idea of a Stargate, a portal buried in Mesopotamia, was dramatized in films and television years before the invasion? Almost as if the culture was being primed for the concept. If true, the Stargate changes everything. It means the war in Iraq was not just about controlling the land of the first civilization. It was about controlling the doorway to another one, a gateway to the gods, hidden under the same soil that held the tomb of Gilgamesh. And perhaps these two mysteries are not separate at all. Perhaps the resurrection chamber of Gilgamesh and the Stargate of Mesopotamia are two sides of the same coin. One preserves the body of the Nephilim king, the other provides the means for his return. Which leads to the most terrifying possibility of all, that what was recovered in 2003 was not merely a corpse, but a key. A key to reopening the days of Noah, a key to unleashing powers the ancients tried to bury forever. Perhaps the strangest part of this entire mystery is not what was discovered, but what happened next. Nothing. Think about it. Compare it with any other monumental discovery. If a team of archaeologists announced the discovery of the world's oldest epic hero, the legendary Gilgamesh, king of Uruk, you would expect headlines to explode. News outlets would swarm the site. Scholars from across the globe would fly in. The discovery would fill textbooks, documentaries, museums. Instead, after April 2003, the story went dark, utterly dark. No photographs, no excavation reports, no follow-up interviews with Uruk Fassbinder, no academic debates, no archaeological papers, not even denials, just silence, as though the entire event had been erased from memory. Even the BBC article that first carried the claim of the discovery quietly faded into obscurity, difficult to track, as if someone wanted it forgotten. Meanwhile, the physical site itself was swallowed by war. The US invasion turned much of Iraq into a battlefield. But what happened in Uruk was different. Soldiers weren't just securing territory, they were building a military encampment directly over the dig site. They shut down all activity, barred all outsiders, and made the supposed tomb of Gilgamesh a restricted zone. If this was just mythology, why treat it like a matter of national security? This silence echoes in government records as well. When researchers attempted to use the Freedom of Information Act to uncover documents about Gilgamesh's tomb, the resurrection chamber, or even the location of supposed Nephilim remains, they were met not with transparency, but with denials. Not no such records exist, simply denied, which is often how agencies respond when something is considered too sensitive, too explosive to release. The same silence hangs over the Baghdad museum looting. Hundreds of thousands of artifacts gone, many never recovered. Yet, international pressure for answers dwindled to nothing. Why? Why were these ancient Sumerian relics treated as disposable footnotes to the war when, in truth, they represented the very cradle of human history? Unless, of course, someone already had what they wanted, and the rest was meant to be forgotten. Ask yourself, if Gilgamesh truly was a Nephilim king, and if his body was preserved in a resurrection tomb, then what government on earth would ever admit to finding it? Imagine the panic. Imagine the theological shockwaves, the rewriting of history, the collapse of institutions built on the assumption that giants and demigods were only myths. To admit the truth would mean admitting that the Bible, the Sumerian epics, and countless global myths were not fables, but reports, and worse, that something long buried might return. Silence is the safest option. Control the site, control the artifacts, control the narrative, and let the rest of the world move on. Distracted by wars, politics, and fluctuating oil prices. But silence itself leaves traces, the gaps, the sudden cutoffs, the unanswered questions. These are patterns, and in those patterns lies the chilling suggestion. What was unearthed in 2003 was not meant for the public. It was meant for the powerful, hidden behind black budgets, classified programs, and secret laboratories. Perhaps that is why every attempt to follow the trail ends in dead ends. The archaeologists fade into obscurity. The media loses interest. The government locks the files. The story dies. And yet, it doesn't set. Because locals still whisper of convoys under the night sky. Because FOIA requests still circle around the same forbidden words. Resurrection, Nephilim, tomb. Because even in silence, the truth refuses to stay buried. In the end, The greatest mystery of Gilgamesh's tomb is not whether it exists. It is why, if it was truly nothing but a myth, the entire world was ordered to forget it. So now the puzzle is laid before you. A 4000-year-old king described as 2/3 god and 1/3 man. A burial chamber called a resurrection tomb. A discovery in April 2003. Silenced by war within weeks. A museum stripped of its Sumerian treasures. And whispers of DNA. Of Nephilim blood. Of a Stargate hidden in the desert sands. Ask yourself, does this sound like coincidence? Or does it sound like a plan? If Gilgamesh was truly Nimrod, the mighty hunter of Genesis, then his story is not mythology, but memory. And his tomb was not simply a grave, but a vault designed to hold something the ancients feared, and the modern world covers. Why else would armies surround it? Why else would governments deny its existence? Why else would artifacts vanish under cover of night? And here's the most unsettling thought of all. What if the story isn't over? What if his resurrection chamber was never meant to remain buried forever? Imagine for a moment that someone out there holds the DNA of a Nephilim king. In an age of cloning, CRISPR, and genetic engineering, could they bring him back? Could they revive the bloodlines of the giants, the men of renown who once defied heaven? The Bible warns, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be at the coming of the Son of Man. The days of Noah were filled with corruption, violence, and giants. Could it be that what was unearthed in 2003 is part of that prophecy, that the stage is being set for history's darkest return? Maybe the wars we watch on television are not about oil, democracy, or weapons of mass destruction. Maybe they're about something far older, far more terrifying. The attempt to control what lies beneath Mesopotamia, the body of a king. The knowledge of the gods, the key to unlocking powers long thought lost. And if that's true, then perhaps we've already crossed the threshold. Perhaps the silence isn't about protecting us from myth, but hiding from us a truth so disturbing it would rewrite the story of humanity itself. What was taken from Gilgamesh's tomb? Where is it now? And what are they doing with it? One day, those answers may explode into the open. And when they do, the world will never look the same. Until then, all we can do is search, question, and connect the dots that others want buried. Because maybe, just maybe, the past isn't dead, it's waiting. What truth, what suppressed history, do you believe our leaders are hiding from us right now? Share your most compelling insights in the comments below.